Are you ready to put on your armor and take your place in God's army? Welcome to the What's Your Armor podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Benedict. Here we'll be exploring how God is building real-life warriors to shift atmospheres through their stories and work. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the What's Your Armor podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Benedict, and I have another dynamic guest with me today. And I picked this guy because I've had relationships with him for probably about the past 2 years. We're under one of the same brands from one of our previous interviews with Stuart. We're as athletes under Optimum Nutrition, but I'm most intrigued by this guy's. I've had personal interactions with him, and he's an ex-former college athlete turned entrepreneur. He organizes informational events from fitness to business development seminars to holistic aspects and to running athletes' brands and things as a whole. Along with that, the biggest piece for me that stood out to me with this guy is that his mental perspectives, from translating them from life experience to competitive sports to bringing them into the workspace. And like I've said, this podcast is all about practical knowledge, with not only how your experiences are developed, but have you walked with them within your faith and in what you feel that you've done the capacity with, to the aspects of, the excess. Nonetheless, this is my buddy, Cody Allen. How we doing, Cody?
Good, my man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. I appreciate your time. And like I said, I'm so glad to catch up with you. We've got a lot of correlations in what we do, not only in the entrepreneur aspect and the building aspect and interacting with companies and brands and things like that, but the perspective aspects and stuff. And what I'm really interested in is, what was the development like, from the nuances of you, Cody, as a little Cody, to kind of like athlete Cody through college, and then, going into business mode Cody, and translating all those pieces that they correlate, in a seamless manner.
Yeah. It's funny because I just got done co-authoring a book. It gets published, I think, in a couple months, just about this. It's called Forever Athlete, and it talks about how the things that are instilled in you really mentally as an athlete, as a young athlete, and how you translate that into virtually the rest of your life,
Right.
But I am huge on just how I was raised and taking those experiences, like you said, translating them into young adult life, my relationships with anybody, romantic and not, into the way that I approach my work life. I guess I can just kind of go back from the beginning. Growing up, for me, was never tumultuous. I had a very good childhood, but I was I'll call it a child of divorce. And I've had I won't say fractured relationship with my father, because I've talked to him one time since I was 6 years old. And I'm 30, so do the math. But that right there, I've had a stepdad who I love to death for the last 20 years, and he's the greatest guy. We can kind of go into that too. But that right there, I started to see some of the coping mechanisms that young children use in retrospect around that time frame. So I was just a normal kid growing up. I was unathletic. I was whatever it was. I was a 5-year-old. Around 7, 8 years old, I started having really bad we'll call them eating problems, right? I became obese. I was 150 pounds in the 5th grade. I wasn't athletic at all. I had an extremely close relationship with my mother and food. And those were my two comforts, if you will. And that's something that I had struggled with very early on, that it kind of like paved, if you will, the rest of my life. Because that right there you're talking about a young boy that's trying to do sports and things like that. I'm what you called at that time an MPR kid. That's for like minimum plays required. Basically, my mom signed me up to play baseball, and
Yep. Yep.
she paid, so I had to play at least 3.5 innings. And I was horrible at sports, man. But I tried, and I had at the time a single mom that was trying to make ends meet and get things going and make sure that her son still was able to play sports and do all the things that you could do. And in retrospect, it's like I definitely didn't appreciate it as much as I should have. But it kind of just from an early age knocked me on my ass. Not having a dad around, I think, and I found this out through therapy that I go to regularly now. I didn't realize
Mm,
how much not having a father affected me, at least when in
yeah.
my younger years. And so it did a few things for me. It helped me understand and appreciate my mother and those around me immensely. I was also never one of the people that, I guess you'd say, got angry at the parent that left. Of course, there was doubts and wondering like, oh, why not me, and those sort of things. Well, like, why'd you leave? Type stuff. But it was never anger that like fueled my passion to do more in life. As so I thought. Um, Fast forward, I mean, get through all this stuff, but fast forward, my stepdad came into my life around the time that I was, 20 years ago, so 10. And he indirectly showed me how to treat not only women, but people that you love, right? So I had only seen one type of love that came from my mom, which is like a very, me and my mom are extremely close, very like in your face, like I love you, I love you, I love you all the time. My stepdad
Mm,
and I, he showed me that he loved me from showing me the ability to nurture and take care of me, somebody that wasn't his kid, right? Somebody that could come in and take care of my mom without, he never sat me down and showed me like, hey, this is how you become a man or whatever. It was just more so along the lines of like, lead by example, if you will. Then, and obviously being around that, I adopted that. That is how I've sort of lived my life ever since seeing my stepdad do it, is leading by example. And that translated over into my athletic career. Long story short, I got athletic. Freshman year of football, I started playing football when I was in high school and took to it, ended up getting a scholarship. It was like my thing. It's like fish to water, right? Um, but I've talked about this in my book in regards to the ebbs and flows of a sports career are so closely correlated to that you have in life. And I know that you can definitely feel like empathize with this. And what I mean by that is when it comes to athletics, I was at a low going into high school, right? I wasn't good. So it's like, did I like going? Did I get out of it what I needed to? No, I just kind of like was there because I'd done it for so long. It was something that my parents wanted me to do. I get into high school and I immediately get on this trajectory to take me to what would be considered like a popular, like good athlete. I started getting a lot of notoriety. And each year, I ended up getting better and better and better, getting more notoriety. Our team got better. And so I was at the what we'd consider like the peak of like my high school development. And that instilled a ton of confidence in me that I think is needed in like young men and young people especially. But it also showed me that when you work hard, you can reap the benefits of it. But at that point, things definitely more came more naturally to me in that sport. But I already knew what it felt like to not be good at sports. And now I knew what it felt like to be great at sports, right? I was getting all these scholarship offers and looked at by a bunch of different people. And I'm from a small town in Sonoma County, California, where it was a one high school town. Everybody loved their football, and so I was like, oh, everybody knows Cody Allen at in my home. Not everybody. Who the hell am I kidding? But a lot of people like knew the football program, right? And I was always in the newspaper and stuff. Um, but the mentality of that was like, oh, I'm just going to continue on this trajectory. I was a very highly recruited linebacker at my school, the college that I ended up going to was Sacramento State, and I was one of the first people to commit my scholarship. I walk on campus the first day of fall camp as a freshman, and Stephen, when I tell you that I was the worst player on the field, I felt, would be a severe understatement. I played quarterback and safety in high school. In college, I mean, I was 220 pounds. So in college, they're like, all right, well, you
Mm.
need to play linebacker, man. Like I'm 6 foot 220. And I was like, all right, like this is what I'm built for. I'm trusting that you guys are making this decision for me. You guys are the coaches. I walk in and it is a much faster game. It's a position that I had never played before. And literally and figuratively, I just got hit in the mouth, right? um, the first week, all of this confidence that I'd built over the last 4 years that I didn't have when I was younger, but then I built in high school was then stripped of me. I became, and I think that young men and young people, and just people in general, when they lack confidence, or even more so when confidence is stripped from them, that's when they can get pretty low. You know, you have
Yeah.
all this self doubt and all these people relying on you. And it's like, oh man, like, am I as good as I thought I was?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is what we talk about when we talk about facing adversity. There was really only one way to approach this in my mind. Obviously, there's multiple ways. I could fold my cards and give up, and football is not for me. Maybe I wasn't who I was. Or I could go back to the books and think about, all right, what got me to the peak in high school? It was falling in love with the game, taking every single day and practicing as hard as I could, understanding the game because it was a foreign sport to me at the time. And I learned and I learned and I learned and I learned from every single instance. And so by the time fall camp had finished, I had improved dramatically. By the time the season ended, I got redshirt player of the year. So I was the
Mm.
best defense. I got defensive redshirt player of the year. So I was basically the best defensive freshman on the team. Um, and that's something that I hold dearly in my heart because I knew what it was like the first day that I stepped on that campus in fall camp, you know?
Yeah.
Um, that
I want to
was,
ask you about. I want to jump in here right for a second. Is that a couple of things that have stood out to me is that you know there's two nuances that have been kind of like repeated in your conversation thus far and stuff. One, I am no stranger to the aspect of loss of like identity, but also the aspect of not having strong male figures in your life. What that piece right there, the lack of strong male figures up until a certain point, where then you had your stepfather step in to give you some severance of what a male leader should look like, and kind of push you in that direction. What, how, in those aspects, like you had a very strong relationship with your mother, and but that doesn't really contribute to the aspects, especially when developing males and boys, at a young age. So where do you feel like those nuances had to be developed on your own by trial and error, by life experience, or were there other bits and pieces here and there that were like, oh, okay, well, you've seen other fathers or friends' fathers or interacted with people that you kind of picked up things along the way that helped you develop and overcome certain things like the weight issue and the lack of confidence aspect in sports and that piece? How did that kind of snowball?
when dealing with children, I understand you have to be diligent about the things that you say because you don't want to cause too many scars, for lack of a better term.
Mm.
And so there were men in my life, whether they be teammates, fathers that saw potential in me as an athlete or as a young boy, that really dedicated the time. One person specifically, so I played baseball. Like I said, I was an NPR kid, but I got really good at baseball in middle school. And part of the reason was went through puberty. One of the main reasons was because one of my mom's best friends and one of my friends in high school, I played baseball with him all the way through little league and then into high school and football and whatever. Uh, but his dad was our coach, and he kind of took me under his wing in regards to showing me how to approach the game of sports as like a young man should. My neighbor brought me to the batting cages every single day after school 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and dedicated his time because my mom couldn't do it and I didn't have someone that could do it, right? As far as developing me as a young man, I would mostly say that I've always been an extremely introverted person, definitely a kid. Um, and I've always been very perceptive and looking and understanding different people's relationships, the things that they do, trying to understand. I've always been a curious person in that aspect. Probably stems back from me trying to understand why my dad is or was the way that he is, right? So, seeing how other people interacted with their father figures, seeing how people did it in the media and things like that. And then also, like I said, my stepdad never sat me down, but being perceptive and understanding and seeing how he acted in a lot of certain ways. There are a lot of ways that I am more quote unquote masculine than my stepdad, right? If I threw my stepdad a football, I'd hit him in the face and break his nose. But he can build a house from scratch, right? And I've learned a lot of those traits from him that are considered like masculine traits. Um, but when it comes to being a quote unquote like man, there's this documentary that I watched 5, 6 years ago that really resonated with me. It's called The Mask You Live In. And it talks about masculinity in young men and how, from a very young age, the society puts pressures on young men to behave in a certain way that's deemed as quote unquote masculine or manly, right?
Mm.
One of the things that they say is from a young age, you can walk into any playground in America, walk up to two boys or walk up to a group of boys, and you can start a fight just by saying who's the biggest sissy on the in the playground, right? So what's viewed as masculine or what a man should be in America, it's changed over the years, but it's the most athletic, the strongest, the most rich, most wealthy, the most promiscuous, the most emotionally and mentally like strong and stubborn, right? If you look at the old school like version of a man, um, that's probably what I viewed as a man growing up. Seeing my and like what you asked me how I felt like my childhood was formed from a male standpoint. Seeing my stepdad be what is considered a real man. What I consider a man is somebody who's caring, somebody who's compassionate, somebody that you can turn to, somebody that is a provider, and not just physically, but emotionally as well. A provider and somebody that's willing to go the extra mile to make sure that you're okay and you're that they're there for you. And so when you talk about the things that developed me as a man, those are the attributes that I picked up from my family members versus the traditional manly aspects that I guess sports has kind of hardened me into. But I don't like the
Mm.
closed minded approach as far as the way that masculinity is viewed in America, especially. I don't know about other countries, but how it's not okay for the young man, especially, to open up about the way that they feel, to talk about how things made them react. And what you see, the byproduct of that is you see a lot of frustrated young men that don't know how to communicate or don't know how to act on their feelings. And that's when you see violence. Like somebody gets so frustrated that they're getting made fun of and don't understand how it's making them feel that they hit someone, right? Um, and that's just kind of like the standard for like how young men are brought up nowadays. And I think that we, as people that are more open minded, have to kind of break that mold, if you will. And that's kind of how I was raised.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with that aspect. And the, it's a very, I think, very, the society in which, children in general are growing up in right now with everything, with all the nuances and fluxes of mandates and COVID and all this other stupidity that's going on. And, then you have not only those aspects, but then you have the aspects of the female population, the male population, how they're constantly against each other. And
Mhm.
you have women's lib, and then males are demasculated and they don't know how to act anymore, and they don't know how to interact with females because they feel like every aspect in which they say something, they're going to be put in jail for something. It's like it's really, really a tough situation for a lot of young males right now. But I definitely am in agreement and in alignment with the aspects of the emotional awareness in which men have had to subdued and suppress their aspects in stressing and being able to share their emotions that would look down upon as demasculine. Okay, so now we're in college. Your cream of the crop, shifted positions, kind of getting your confidence swept out from underneath you, and then having to regain it. How do things develop after that? Now you have a whole nother chapter that is, okay, your what you thought your kind of football career was going to look like coming in from high school. Now that's a total shift. This next chapter, and then kind of like shifting after that, you kind of hit the whole entrepreneurial aspect.
Right. And I mean, even prior to that, just to go back to the ebbs and flows, I got right back up to like that starting position in college and then neck injury. And so recovering from that was like a whole nother twisted mind, whatever you want to word you
Mm.
want to use. And so I went the ups and downs throughout my entire athletic career, facing the adversity, putting a straight face on through it all. And that really helped one harden me when it comes to the performance of my athletic and business career. But it also helped me understand, and I always use this term, it's going to be okay no matter what, it's going to be okay. There's this analogy that I always use in the game of football. So I played linebacker, and one play, I could be breaking through the line of scrimmage, flattening the offensive lineman, and then tackling the running back in the backfield. 30 seconds later, offensive lineman could have his helmet in my chest and I could be laying on my back pancaked. And so what I mean by that is we always say you live to play another down. No matter what, the next thing is going to keep coming on. So you're going to get punched in the mouth. Don't get too low. You're going to do something great. Don't get too high because you always need to stay moving forward, right? When you think about throwing something or even talk about like
Mm-hmm.
the physics of speed velocity, um, the correct trajectory is out and up. If you just go straight up and you're super high, you're going to come straight back down. You always want to be moving forward. Um, but as that transitioned, having a neck injury in college definitely didn't help. But people always ask me like, oh, like why didn't you go to the NFL? When it comes out to it, I was not good enough, and I've
Mm.
made peace with that. Right? There's a million excuses and reasons anybody could say why, but I mean, just easy answer is not good enough. So I
Yeah.
had the decision after college: do I want to continue to um, try to do the practice squad thing and chase the dream or whatever? Do I want to start making money? I was like, I kind of want to start making money, right? So I started working in banking and I approached that job the same way that I did athletics, which was first one in, last one out, work your ass off, don't complain about anything, do what you're told, that sort of thing. And I excelled pretty rapidly within the space. And so I got into a position. I basically got a bunch of promotions within like the first year and a half, and I was riding higher above the other 23-year-olds at the company. Um, Started doing investments, started doing big business lending, and I was back at that high. I took a foreign topic or whatever it is, occupation, and I got back up to that high. Even so much that I got recruited to go to work at another company. Um, got recruited to work at another company, worked at that company for about a year, and this was to go outside of the work world. This is where the first real relationship that I was in, you could say, for lack of a better term, messed me up, right? And I allowed my personal life bleed into my professional life. And that one wasn't like me, but two, I allowed things that were happening in my personal life and relationship bring me to that low. And to this day, I could say it was definitely the lowest I had ever felt, from like a depression standpoint, like an "Are you okay?" standpoint, and from the outside looking in, everybody thought that I was doing okay, because we talk back, and now I'm vastly different. But at that time, I was under the tune that like men can't express their feelings, they can't, nothing can be wrong with them, because there's not like an open forum to do so. Now, obviously through therapy and whatnot, I always have an open forum to talk about how I'm feeling about certain things. Nonetheless, because of things that happened in that relationship, I ended up getting fired from the job that I got recruited at. So here I was, at we'll not say a low, but I started a new career. Now I'm coming back up to peak in this career after a 4 year period, and I was fired, knocked right back down onto my ass. And I'd never been fired from anything before. I was excelling extremely well at work. I was doing great. But when you're not tied in completely mentally, you're not going to be the best version of yourself. I'm sure that you can attest to that as an athlete. Um, it's sometimes it's not your body, it's nothing, it's just literally your mind's not there. And so that brought me into a point in my life where I turned back to what I knew, and that was athletics. You talked briefly in the past or at the beginning of this podcast about maintaining an identity. So much of who I was my entire life was Cody the athlete, and more important, or more specifically, Cody the football player. I lost that. It was just over for me, right? So I struggled a lot in my young to mid 20s with an identity. I think that it's very important for young men. I can speak on young men. I'm not sure, obviously, all young people to have some sort of identity, almost for self worth. And so I had to transition into the business world, and I just didn't get that same vigor that I had or back from just working a 9 to 5. It just wasn't there. And I felt myself getting quote unquote like bored with life. And that affected my mental state as well. I think that you need to continually challenge and grow, or else you fall into like these mundane patterns, looking for excitement and things outside of your work, right? Um, and that can lead to self-destructive patterns, as it did like in my life. But so like I said, fired. I had a decision to make. Did I want to go back and for lack of a better term, push paper? Um, it didn't excite me before. And so I always said, or I said while over the last few years, I was like, I want to start a business myself. How do I do that? I was like, all right, well, I'm relatively young. I understand online stuff. And I basically, with a couple of buddies of mine, went to, we'll call it YouTube University, and learned how to monetize traffic online. That's how we started the company. And that's how I started this company. It's basically, it became something that was new and exciting for me, and it's performance based like athletics. And it was something that I'm like, all right, the work that I put in, I will reap the benefits of, because when you're in corporate America, you can work really hard and you don't necessarily reap the benefits. When you own your own business, you can work extremely hard and you reap the benefits. But like I said, I've had ebbs and flows. I've had up years, I've had down years, especially dealing with COVID and the shutdowns and everything. My business suffered in 2020. So I've done extremely well, and then I've done poorly. And um, it was around the time that I started my business, and definitely towards the end of my relationship, that I was, like I said, looking for answers. And so that was when, so I used to work out I work at my gym now, at my home gym now. I used to work at this gym called Destiny Fitness. It's in conjunction with a Christian church out here. My buddy was going to the church, and around the time that I was going through that breakup and thereafter, I reached out to one of my friends and I was like, hey, like we work out at this gym. I was like, would you be like, do you want to go to church? And he's like, I always go to church. Me and my family have been going to church for forever. I work out actually. I would at the time. I haven't been to that gym for a couple of years. At the time, I work out with the pastor in the morning, and then the general manager of the gym, like good friend of mine as well. And it was a time in my life definitely that I was looking for who, what, where, when, why. I didn't want to sit here and be like, woe is me, why is this happening to me? I more so wanted to take a different look at faith and how it could positively affect my life. And what I found was that just even being in that setting around the people of the church, there were a lot of people there that were looking for similar answers as me. And if going to church does one thing for you, depending on the church, obviously, it puts you around some good people given the
Yeah.
opportunity. And I think that
Hmm.
some of the people that I met while attending that church, they're still lifelong friends, what I consider like family, Um, but a lot of people there, especially the ones that you surround yourself with, are just there sometimes when they don't need to say anything, but you just to know that someone's there to give you a hug or to help you not feel so lost when you in life a lot of people feel lost. It was exactly what I needed at that point in my life. And I'm obviously forever grateful for it. I'm still in contact with everybody there. And 2020, they actually COVID, they didn't shut down. They're in the newspaper the whole time. And I love
That's
I
great.
love
That's
Pastor
so
Greg for
good.
that. He was all over Fox News and stuff. But I think we talked briefly about this, but looking for like I there as an athlete and specifically a football player, you literally beat your head up against a wall, right? And think that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, you'll eventually break that barrier and be on the other side of it as success.
Hmm.
Sometimes your hard work's not going to get you there. Sometimes you need a little push in the other in the correct direction from something, whether that be your faith, whether that be the people in your circle, whether that be just anything enlightening in your life. And
Right.
that was a point in my life that I can definitely say that I was like, this was not all me, you know?
Well, I think one, I appreciate the vulnerability aspect that you share in that space, because that's a hard thing to do, and gosh, I don't know how many times I've heard that. So, and I think it's a very, very common human trait in us losing our identities in things, in places, and in our work, in titles, in all of those aspects, that when they are stripped away from us, we are lost, especially in the athlete realm. I've seen it so many times where it's like, hey, if they're not an athlete anymore, they have no clue what to do with their life. Like there's no, it's like step off the deep end and they jump off the cliff type deal, and that's why I'm a very big advocate, and I speak a lot on identity aspects, but especially within the athlete aspects, like being an athlete is not enough in this day and age. You need to be an athlete, you need to be a speaker, you need to be a businessman, you need to be a communicator, you need to be all these aspects in order to be the total package for other brands to come, and this, and to come and to want to consort with you, and understand that you're bringing the value, which will in return bring the ROI, that your money will come in from that. But the other aspect is that your identity journey, that from what it sounds to me is like, after you had that kind of experience in the interaction with the church and the people that were very like-minded and also searching for answers and having questions and understanding, like, hey, I'm not alone in this. For me to have questions, it's normal and it's healthy. When you look back, hindsight 2020, right? Looking back in the rearview mirror over the kind of biomarkers in your life, do you, kind of say, hey, okay, I remember that incident and I remember I got to that point, but then something, or, whether, like whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, whether you are on your own faith journey or you believe in your spiritual aspects or whatever that may be, something else is that we would be ignorant if we thought we were walking this thing out on our own and really accomplishing everything in our own will and our own power. Um, what are your kind of like looking back over your own experiences? What do you feel like? There was definitely pushes in the right direction. Decisions that had to be learned from, and which ultimately had your growth from.
I think you're spot on in regards to us being ignorant to think that this is just 100% us. Uh, I'm and it's such a intricate and elaborate topic that I am the type of guy that I'm like, hey, you are a direct, you are exactly where you need to be because of your actions. You are where you are in your life because of your actions. At some point, to that point, that is, I believe, to be correct. But there are things that are put into our life. I mean, I don't think that things are necessarily by chance always. There are things that are put into our life to test us. There are things that are put into our life to make us feel good about certain situations. There are things that are put into our life to show how we're going to react in particular ways, right? And however these things come about is to anybody's interpretation, but I don't think that we're just wandering aimlessly through life, and good things just happen. I think that where we at in life, or where we're at in life, and our path in life is a culmination of a bunch of small, tiny decisions. And I think that something is putting these different obstacles in our life that are going to test us, fortify us, make us a stronger individual if we make the correct decisions. And then each decision that you
Mm.
make, there's going to be another one down the road. And I think that there's constantly something that's being put in our way, um, and that will always change our perspective on our life path in general.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with me. It's like my relationship and my faith journey only really accelerated probably about 3 years ago. And and now and there's no way. And I talk about this all the time. It's like there's no way, shape, or form that I could have walked through half of the stuff that I've been able to walk through from my own experiences and things like that without having like God's hand on me, or with you know just the provision and the aspects, and to be able to do the things that I'm doing now from where I came from. That is just not, like, I could not do that in my own will and my own power. So okay, so now you have all these pieces kind of like set in motion. You've really found a niche in which you're really passionate about. It sounds like you have, good community with you, church aspects and things like that of the people within that community, but then also business community. And, you really are, have a well-rounded head on your shoulders about, masculinity and just being able to express things in a very humble and approachable manner. What is on the plate now for the Cody Allen brand and what you're doing? I know you have a book coming out. Your podcast that just started. What are some of the nuances that have kind of sparked you for this next season?
Um, I would say right now, I've definitely been focusing on getting more of who I am out there. And I think that's something that you've also dove into a bit over the last couple of years is people always viewed me as the athlete, right? And so I do things like write the book, start the podcast so people can see the other aspects of Cody that aren't a Instagram picture with me with my shirt off or some stuff like that. Um, the podcast, it's called Fill the Gap, and it's correlated to um, the mental, it's correlated to football in a sense that, like, filling the gap defensively, it's a tough thing to do, but the only way that you can get through things if you face them head on, right?
Right.
And to approach that in your life, to approach that in business, your relationships, and things of that nature. So I don't talk about football ever. I'm not talking about fantasy football or anything on the podcast. It's all about these experiences that we briefly talked about today on this podcast, experiences in my life, and how mentally I've been able to fill the gap or overcome them. I think that this portion, like you said, this season of my life is definitely more on me projecting who I am as a person and me continuing to develop and hone in on who I am as a man. I think it's extremely important that I continue to work on that because I've had the most growth, I would say, in the last year and a half or so. Um, since I started going to therapy, since I started to really take a deep dive into who I am as a person. So the types of content that I put out, the type of businesses that I open are things that are going to pay dividends to me emotionally, spiritually, physically, versus things in the past where I was just kind of like running the rat race. Now I'm doing a lot more things for me, and that is the podcast, the book, my businesses, um, continuing to develop the brands that we work on.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah. I know we've been meaning to do a bunch of things together and stuff like that, and our schedules have been all over the place, but we definitely need to connect. I know you got some things on the plate, and I have some things on the plate. So, and I'm a big advocate of partnerships, especially partnerships that can bring more value to the kind of, public, and giving them more tools and equipping people with better assets in order to live their lives better. And I think we correlate on a lot of different aspects in this space. What is your, so you have your marketing agency, Digital Cartel. Yes, that's still up and healthy. Now, what do you feel like is like really your takeaway for this, your current message, your current values that have been put in place and that current have been of like your overall kind of like message, your overall like living statement right now? And obviously that evolves and changes over things, but it's something that I'm interested in kind of honing in on people's really true values and what drives them behind the game.
As far as how I've been operating my life and my business, I have this, I don't have this saying, I'm sure it's made up somewhere else, but it's how you do anything is how you do everything.
Mm,
And what that essentially means is if I'm going to be like, I had an old boss who sucked. This boss sucked, actually. He said, we were in the banking. He's like, if I was a garbage man, I would be the best garbage man. If I was a janitor, I'd be the best janitor there. And so what I mean by that is, or what he meant by that rather, is no matter what you do in life, you have to try to do it to your best of your abilities. And if I look at someone and they're just, we'll say, a shitty boyfriend, right? Then why don't, but they're great at work. Why don't you take the same vigor and dedication that you do at work to being a better boyfriend, a better husband, right? A better father. And so the way that I've tried to like encapsulate my life and do everything is if I'm going to be working out, I'm putting in as much effort as I would put in as if I was trying to develop a new skill reading, or if I was trying to do something at work, or if I was trying to be the best boyfriend. And I haven't always been that way. I used to be so concentrated in one thing that other things took the exception and I lacked in those. And so at this point in my life, I'm definitely trying to be more on the even playing field as far as the effort and the commitment that I give to all things in my life.
I like that. I think that's a really good piece, especially nowadays, is because I think a lot of people's work experiences have shifted and changed and evolved so vastly from whatever the work space looks like now, as far as remotely wise, and the relationship aspects have taken such a big hit at the home and in business and everything because of the nuances in which those relationships need to be kind of honed in on, and more effort needs to be put in there, where before it's been a 9 to 5 grind, come home, have dinner, go to bed, and the conversational aspects have been very nil and nil. But I love that. Really trying to take your strengths and not so much, and I want to clarify on that piece too, because I feel like a lot of people would take that in a extreme aspect where they're like, okay, well, I'm strong over here. Let's just spread this out across a bunch of things and then spread myself too thin, and then I don't get any movement in. There's an equal balance. There's like, pick a couple things that you feel you can excel in, but ultimately, yeah, I'm definitely, be multifaceted, be versatile, and especially in this day and age. Awesome, Cody. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? What are the hot topics for you right now? And I will put all this stuff in the show notes, so make sure you give me all the links and stuff like that. But yeah, let everybody know where they can find all about Cody Allen.
Yeah, of course. I keep it pretty simple. All my social channels are just going to be the Cody Allen. My website is the same. It's thecodyallen.com. There you can find ebooks on marketing, fitness space, a lot about what we talked about today. You'll be able to find my book there eventually. You'll find my YouTube content that talks a lot about this. It has my podcast, Fill the Gap, on there. It also has different articles and stuff that I write within the health and wellness space. And there's a ton of great content on there just in that aspect. So I would say if you're going to get anything, go to my website or my social channels.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Make sure you guys go check that stuff out. He's got a really streamlined website, and I'm a big website guy and stuff like that, and eye-catching. So he has everything very, very interactive and very user-friendly. So guys, go check that out. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in for another episode of the What's Your Armor podcast. Thank you much, Cody, for your time, and we will see you guys next week on another episode of the What's Your Armor podcast. I'll talk to you guys soon. I appreciate everyone for listening to today's episode of the What's Your Armor podcast. Stay connected with me by visiting stevieb.com or on Instagram at Stevie_B. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe wherever you listen. I'll see everyone next week.